Construction activity continued outside on the roof. As electricians worked inside stringing cables, steel workers on the outside were finishing the walls of the mock-up building. The building was due to be occupied in midwinter, January 1967.
We realized early that we were not going to be able to turn over a completed facility. It would be not heated, would be wide open on one end. The floors would still be curing out. The shell is about all we had to deliver. They were wearing gloves and their mackinaws and their hard hats.
They were very, very motivated, the workforce. There was no need to try to energize them. They were on a very romantic task. They're building the world's largest airplane. And they would, we had people that would drive all the way from Tacoma, which is, 70 miles away, to get to Everett to work on the aircraft. They had an enthusiasm that welled up, and finally someone coined the word that they were the Incredibles. And trying to think of who decided, but they got Paul Bunyan insignia and put it on their hard hats. They had to work on hard hats because the building was still under construction, and on their lunch pails, and they had them on their jackets and what have you. And they really did a yeoman's job, yeah.
It was incredible. And the Incredibles is what they were called.
The railway from Puget Sound to Everett ran up its steep incline right into the factory in order to bring the literally millions of parts of the plane together in the right place at the right time. The factory was virtually a city in itself. It was the world's largest building in cubic capacity, covering 43 acres under one continuous roof. It housed thousands of workers and had its own food and medical facilities. A stage as big as 40 football fields, only waiting now for the appearance of its principal player, a player whose lines had been polished and refined over many months by many people, all striving to make sure that everything would be all right when the curtain went up on opening night.
The whole job started way back down the line when engineers were still looking at paper airplanes and models, and wind tunnel testing began.
Our people devote literally thousands of hours of their time, and both on paper and in the wind tunnel, to minimize drag, because drag is money. Drag costs weight, drag costs fuel.
In the months of early development, Joe Sutter and his team experimented with nearly 50 different possible shapes, including this double-decker mid-wing configuration. Millions of dollars were spent on wind tunnel testing, and every aerodynamic parameter was measured and recorded. Boeing needed an entirely new engine to power the 747, and they got it from Pratt & Whitney, who'd been working on a similar but smaller concept for the C-5A competition. It was called a high bypass ratio engine, a development of the fan jet, model JT9D. It produced 43,500 pounds of thrust, up to 87,000 horsepower. Pratt & Whitney had to test the engine without a finished plane, so they leased a B-52 from the Air Force and modified it to install a JT9D in place of two of the B-52's normal engines. In the flight test program, the B-52 flew at altitudes over 45,000 feet, and under extreme conditions, the engine was given a clean bill of health. This device, called the Praying Mantis, was designed to give pilots the experience of taxiing the 747 from a cockpit 29 feet above the ground. The 747's chief test pilot, Jack Waddell, was heavily involved in this preliminary testing, and he could, with practice, park it next to a cargo dock with a plus or minus 6-inch tolerance. It proved to many 747 customers that the huge plane would not be an uncontrollable horror around airports. The prospect of emergency evacuation from an unusual height was also faced early in the 747's development, and pilots were given an opportunity to fly in a simulator that used a remotely controlled TV camera scanning an accurate terrain model. In the simulator,